Management science often appears to be driven by a desire to create the most complicated diagrams possible, to take abstract concepts and ensure they remain incomprehensible. Okay, perhaps I exaggerate a little, but not too much. My hope for process-based management is that it brings simplicity, not more complexity, to management. As somebody once said, perhaps it was Einstein, let's make it as simple as possible, but no simpler. We don't want to be simplistic, but the ideas do need to work in the complicated, messy world in which we work. Okay, I'm a consultant, so of course I have a diagram. In this process insight, I want to introduce a framework for process performance management that I find very useful to both explain and to coordinate the practical implementation of strategy-driven process-based management. Let's walk it through. So here's the diagram. Let's start at the bottom, down here with process change, because process change is really what we're trying to do. If we're not changing processes, that is to say improving performance, then the rest of it is a waste of time. So we want to make the changes, not just make plans for changes, but actually deliver the change. Before we can do that, we need to have a very good understanding of what problem it is or what opportunity is we're trying to address. So what's the impact? What's the gap impact? What's the benefit of making the change? What's the cost of not making the change? We need to be very clear about that. Sometimes in our process improvement projects, that doesn't happen. We don't do that kind of impact analysis. We make change recommendations and nothing happens. So gap analysis, very important. What is the impact of the change or not making the change? Now that implies, of course, that we understand what the gap is in the first place, that we've been able to measure it. So we need to have some way of understanding that there is a gap, either an opportunity gap or a performance gap. So at this bottom level of the diagram, this is about managing performance. Over here, we're managing performance. Now, if we're able to do that, then we need to be able to define performance in the first place. Otherwise, how could we say there's a gap? So let's go to the next level of the diagram. And what we want to be able to do, firstly, is with our stakeholders, understand what this process is meant to do. What are the objectives of this process? So we can define that. And we define that with the stakeholders. We don't go off and guess at it. The question is always, if this process was working as well as the key stakeholders want it to, what would it be doing and how would we know? That's the process KPI question. So we'll understand what the stakeholder objectives are, and that'll let us set KPIs and targets. And now we've defined a performance. Now we've got something to measure against. Now, in both of these levels, where we've been defining performance and measuring performance, managing performance, we've been talking about a particular process. But that begs the question, which process? Okay, let's go to the top level where we'll address that issue. And we address it by starting with organizational strategy. And I mean literally starting with that. You get out the vision, mission, objectives, purpose statement, whatever form it takes, because what we want to know is what are the promises we make. That's what our strategies do, don't they? They make promises to deliver something to some group of stakeholders. So we want to know what those promises are, because it's our highest level cross-functional processes that deliver on those promises. That's the way it happens in every organization. That's the whole point of process-based management, to identify those cross-functional processes. And of course, at this higher level, we're talking about the architecture, the process architecture of all the processes. And we start in my projects, for example, we would start at the top and we'd just come down 3 levels to start with. And over time, we dig down to whatever level we need to, but we're not trying to come down to, level 6 across the entire architecture. We need a purpose. We need to be able to do these things because there's some need to. We do it just in time, not just in case. So to review this diagram then, this framework, let's take it from the top. If we were starting to do process-based management, what do? Well, we start at the top, not the bottom. We start at the top and we say, what's the strategy? I've never met an organization that didn't have a strategy. Some are better than others, of course. Some are better articulated, better documented. But I've never been in an organization where they couldn't at least tell you what the strategy is, what their purpose is. And if you don't know that, then there are other things to work on rather than the process architecture. But we go to that, and I literally go to the mission, vision statements, whatever the documentation is, and I'm looking to physically highlight the verbs in those statements, because it's the verbs that are going to tell us what we're promising. Will give us some indication anyway. So we want to know what are the promises we make. So what is the promise we make and to whom? If we're a hospital, we're promising to provide care to patients. If we're a university, we're promising to provide educational experience and the culmination of that is some sort of qualification for students. We're making a promise to society to produce good graduates. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking to identify. And sometimes that can be a very powerful thing for an organisation to do because they might have developed a strategy, but they haven't actually thought about it in that way. So sometimes it's easy and sometimes it takes a little longer. But from that, we can build the process architecture. And when I say we usually start by building the first 3 levels of the management core and support processes. Another video about that some other time. But this is not a huge undertaking. This will happen in an elapsed time of, a couple of months. You could do it in a much shorter elapsed time, but I think it needs some time to think about it and some maturation, and lots of people need to have the chance to comment. But it's not lots and lots of work. It's a relatively straightforward thing to do, assuming you have some understanding of your strategy. So now we've got a process architecture, and then we can say, okay, let's pick some processes, typically 3, and let's start to do these 2 levels here of active process management. So what are the process objectives? We identify the stakeholders first. What do they want from it? We have these kind of discussions and workshops. From that, we can build process KPIs, and then we'll say, okay, what are the targets for the KPIs? And whatever the needs of the stakeholders are reflected in process KPIs, and then we'll have targets. And sometimes that's easy to do, and sometimes it's a little more complicated. Sometimes it's a bit controversial about setting the targets. The target might be a kind of single number, 9 out of 10 type number, or it could be a matrix or a multidimensional set of data. And because we've got different classes of products and services, different classes of customers, maybe different service levels for different times of the business cycle, etc. So it could be multidimensional. But now we've got, for the processes that we've got under active management, we've got targets. We know the process KPIs. We know the targets for those KPIs. And we've got a good understanding of the stakeholders as well. We're building deep knowledge of this process. Okay, so now we just get on, get the circles turning. There's another video about that. What are the gaps? Is there a problem gap, a performance anomaly? It should be 9 out of 10, but it's 8 out of 10. Or maybe that's an emerging thing. Maybe the last 3 times we measured it, it's going in the wrong direction. So we know there's a problem that's very likely to happen soon. So let's stop that before it arrives. Or maybe there's just an opportunity gap. Here's a new bit of technology, a new way of thinking, new mode of operation, some innovation we can bring to the process. So we identify the performance gap, a problem or an opportunity gap. And then this very important part here where for the particular process we're talking about, we're going to say, what's the gap impact? What is the impact of fixing or changing this process? And what's the impact of not doing it? Is it a priority? Is it something we should do? And should we do it now? And how much should we spend on it? We need a business case. If we can't make a solid business case for change, then don't recommend the change because it's not going to happen. We'll just pretend, And then for those changes where we do have a good business case, we can get on and make the change. And rinse and repeat. We keep that cycle going for the processes that we've got under active management. So we need the overarching view of the process architecture, and then we need to pick a set of processes, those high-impact processes that we're going to have under active management, and then we can start doing the active defining of performance and then managing that performance. Process performance management is not something we do once a quarter or once a year, once every 6 months. No, man, it's an active thing. We're all the time trying to optimize performance of the process in a context where many things about our process execution are actually changing. So let's summarize what we've been talking about. And the 3-word summary is active process management. The most important part of that is active. So it's not just something we're going to do once a quarter or once a year. It's active. We want to be continuously improving, so we've got to be continuously measuring, continuously assessing for opportunities for improvement. So it's a very active thing. It's not passive. And to be able to do that active process management on our high-impact processes, we've got to know what they are, of course, but we have to understand the context in which they work. And the work they're doing is to execute strategy. So we need to understand from the strategy down how our processes relate to the delivery of our products and services and experiences to customers and other stakeholders. So it's very important that when we're building the process architecture, we actually start with the strategy. Because then each of our processes that we define in the architecture has, if you like, a line of sight back to the strategy. We'll understand its strategic purpose. And that's important. Now, we're doing this for the high-impact processes, this active process management. So we're not doing it for the hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of processes. How many high-impact processes are there for active management? Well, I don't know, maybe it's 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. It's that kind of number. But we start small. We might just start with one, if you like, or two or three. And once we get better at it, we can add some more and add some more and add some more. So we can do this in this incremental way where we're learning as we're going and getting better and better at it. So we can be selective, we can be very focused, very mindful about it. We're not doing anything we couldn't roll back if we needed to. We can be flexible and we can achieve that level of active process management in a very controlled, risk-free way, delivering lots of benefits from improved performance. And the thing for us to think about in all of our process-based management work is that last comment there. The purpose is performance.